Hello, this is Tony Hiller from RealClimateScience.com. In 1903, Greenland was melting down. December 5th, 1903, glaciers disappear. The ice in Greenland is melting more rapidly than it's formed. Comparison of the descriptions of the Jakobshavn Glacier shows that its edge has receded 8 miles since 1850, and the glacier has lost 20 to 30 feet in depth. It's surprising that Greenland was melting down in 1903 because New Zealand had become close to realizing the ideal state of the socialist. According to climate experts, socialism is supposed to stop global warming. The good news, though, is that the Jakobshavn Glacier has stopped melting. In 2019, NASA reported that the Jakobshavn Glacier had grown for the third straight year. So according to NASA, the glacier was melting in 1903 during one of the coldest years on record, but now that it's much warmer, the Jakobshavn Glacier is growing. And this makes perfect sense to climate alarmists. But this video is about New Zealand and cow burps. New Zealand targets cow burps to help reduce global warming. How do you stop a cow from burping? It might sound like the start of a humorous riddle, but it's the subject of a huge scientific inquiry in New Zealand. And the answer could have profound effects on the health of the planet. More specifically, the question is how to stop cows, sheep, and other farm animals from belching out so much methane, a gas which doesn't last as long as carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but is at least 25 times more potent when it comes to global warming. So we've heard the propaganda, now let's look at the actual science. Methane makes up less than 2,000 parts per billion of the atmosphere, which means it's less than 2 parts per million. If everybody in the Rose Bowl represented one molecule of the atmosphere, odds are that none of them would be methane. In other words, methane is very rare in our atmosphere. But other planets like Saturn's moon Titan have a lot of methane. There's so much methane on Titan that it actually forms oceans of liquid methane. At the pressures found on Titan's surface, liquid methane can only exist at extremely cold temperatures. Even though Titan has huge amounts of methane in its atmosphere, it's extremely cold there. Methane doesn't appear to be doing a very good job of global warming on Titan. The reason why Earth doesn't have a lot of methane in our atmosphere is because we have a lot of oxygen. Methane reacts quickly with oxygen to form carbon dioxide and water, so we have very little free methane in our atmosphere at any time. Titan, on the other hand, has almost no oxygen in their atmosphere, so there's nothing for the methane to react with, and it accumulates on the surface. In the 16th century, there were 100 million bison roaming the Great Plains of the United States and Canada. The herds of bison were so big that an American soldier said it took him 6 days to ride on horseback through a single herd. But at the time there were 100 million bison roaming the Great Plains, Earth's temperature was the coldest of the last millennium. This graph was from the 1990 report of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. 100 million bison burping methane wasn't doing much to heat up the planet during the Little Ice Age. We've looked at the empirical evidence, now let's look at what radiative transfer models have to say about methane. I used the rapid radiative transfer model from AER to generate this graph. That's the radiative transfer model used by the National Center for Atmospheric Research in their climate and weather models. This graph shows what happens if we vary the amounts of 3 different greenhouse gas species. The blue line represents methane, the red line represents water vapor, and the yellow line represents carbon dioxide. The left side of the graph shows what would happen if that greenhouse gas species was reduced by a factor of 100. The right side shows what would happen if that greenhouse gas species was increased by a factor of 10. You can see that water vapor, shown in red, is far and away the most important greenhouse gas. The next most important greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide, shown in yellow, but it has much less effect than water vapor. And the blue line is methane. As you can see, that line is almost flat. Even if the amount of methane in the atmosphere increased by a factor of 10, it would have almost no impact on the greenhouse effect. And methane is only growing at about 15 parts per billion per year, which means that it would take more than 100 years for the amount of methane in the atmosphere to double. Methane is pretty much irrelevant to the greenhouse effect on Earth. This chart shows the wavelengths of light which are absorbed by different greenhouse gas species. Water vapor absorbs a very wide range of light frequencies. Carbon dioxide absorbs much narrower bands. And absorption of light by methane is almost non-existent. Even worse is the fact that the methane bands overlap with those of water vapor. If there's a significant amount of water vapor in the atmosphere, methane becomes almost completely irrelevant as a greenhouse gas. In other words, this huge scientific inquiry in New Zealand is nothing more than a massive scam. What these people are doing has nothing to do with science. The World Economic Forum is demonizing meat because they want the peasants eating insects, while the members of the World Economic Forum fly around on their private jets and eat steak and lobster. The government of the United Kingdom wants people in Africa eating insects, and CNN wants your dogs to eat insects as well. There's a massive effort being made to demonize meat. But like everything else in the press, it's all fake news. Toto wonders why many humans are so prone to giving up the good things in their life in exchange for nothing more than cheap propaganda. You can visit Toto, Kyrie Caesar, Toki and Upala on the web at realclimatescience.com.